The thread hangs loose from the button on his cuff. It's slate gray, the same color as the suit he wore to my father's funeral. I stare at it, this single, insignificant thread, and the entire world tilts on its axis. It's not supposed to be there. The hotel receipt in my hand is crisp, stark white against the dark wood of our kitchen island. It's from a place called the Cypress Grove, a boutique hotel 3 states away. He was supposed to be in Chicago for the tech conference. Chicago doesn't have Cypress Groves. It has Hyatts and Marriotts and faceless corporate towers that swallow men like him whole for days at a time. My fingers are numb. The paper feels like ice.
2 nights. King Suite.
Room service for 2, charged to our joint account. A bottle of champagne I didn't drink. A lobster dinner I didn't eat. My breath catches in my throat, a tiny, sharp sound in the cathedral-like silence of our home. This house, the one I decorated, the one I managed, the one I thought was our sanctuary, suddenly feels like a crime scene. Every polished surface reflects a distorted version of my face. I see the confusion, the denial fighting a losing battle against the cold, hard fact printed in sterile, black ink. He's not in Chicago. He was never in Chicago. The lie is so blatant, so careless. It feels like a slap. I trace the embossed logo of the hotel, a stylized tree with sweeping branches. A place I've never seen, a place that now owns a piece of my life without my permission. The silence in the house is screaming. If you've ever felt that sickening lurch in your stomach, that moment where the floor disappears from beneath your feet, let me know in the comments below. It's a lonely feeling. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know to feel like I'm not shouting into the void. Our life, before the thread and the receipt, was a carefully curated masterpiece of suburban tranquility. Or so I believed. We had the house with the wraparound porch and the perfectly manicured lawn that Mark paid a service to maintain because he was too busy building our empire. We had the matching silver SUVs in the driveway. We had the dinner parties where our friends would sigh and tell me how lucky I was to have a man so driven, so dedicated. Mark was a man of grand gestures and meticulously planned schedules. He was the sun, and I, it seemed, was a planet content to orbit in his warm, predictable glow. I had my own ambitions once. A degree in hospitality management, a fire in my belly to create spaces where people felt not just welcomed, but seen. I dreamed of running a hotel, a small, intimate place where every detail told a story. But Mark's career took off like a rocket. His software company demanded all of his time, and by extension, a significant portion of mine. "We're a team, babe," he'd say, kissing my forehead as he handed me a stack of receipts to organize. "You handle the home front, I'll conquer the world." For us, and I believed him. I became the chief operating officer of our life. I managed the investments, paid the bills, coordinated the social calendar, and packed his suitcase for the endless stream of business trips. I was good at it. I found a quiet satisfaction in the seamless efficiency of our world, the smooth running of the machine. I convinced myself it was enough. I traded my dreams for his, and for a long time, the returns felt adequate. The security, the comfort, the illusion of a perfect partnership. It was a comfortable cage, gilded with shared memories and future promises. He'd call from airport lounges, his voice a familiar hum of exhaustion and ambition. He'd bring me back little gifts, a silk scarf from Paris, a bottle of perfume from Dubai. Each one a tiny apology for his absence, a down payment on a future where he'd finally be present. A future that, I now realize, was a complete fiction. The life I was managing, the one I had so carefully protected and nurtured, wasn't our life. It was my life, and his and hers. The inciting incident wasn't a single, dramatic explosion. It was a slow leak. It started 6 months ago. The business trips became more frequent. The calls became shorter, more distracted. He started talking about a new project, a massive expansion on the West Coast that required him to be on-site, in person. "It's a game changer, Liv," he'd said, his eyes gleaming with that familiar fire. "This deal will set us up for life." I just need to be there to close it. The first trip to the Cypress Grove was supposed to be a week in San Jose. I packed his suitcase myself. I folded his shirts, arranged his ties, tucked a small photo of us into the front pocket. A little piece of home to remind him what he was working for. When he came back, he was different. Tanned, rested, almost serene. Not the look of a man who'd just spent a week in grueling negotiations. "The California sun did you good," I'd commented, unpacking his bag. He just smiled. "Fresh air helps clear the head." He brought me a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a tiny, generic-looking charm. It wasn't from a known brand. It came in a plain blue box from a gift shop. It felt impersonal, an afterthought. I wore it anyway. I told myself I was being ridiculous. He was working hard for us. I was just lonely. The paranoia was my fault, a symptom of an idle mind. I needed a hobby, a project. I started redesigning the garden, pouring my anxiety into the soil, willing new life to grow, while something inside me was quietly starting to wither. But the little inconsistencies kept piling up, like stones in my pocket, weighing me down. A charge on the credit card for a restaurant in a city he wasn't supposed to be in. A call that went straight to voicemail at a time he was supposedly between meetings. His vague answers when I asked about his day. It was like listening to a story he was making up on the spot, full of corporate jargon and empty details. I was living with a stranger in my husband's skin. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake in our king-sized bed, the empty space beside me feeling like a chasm. I'd stare at the ceiling, tracing the shadows, my mind racing. I started small. I didn't want to believe it, you see. Part of me was desperate to be proven wrong, to be the crazy, jealous wife I was accusing myself of being. I started by checking the phone bill. I told myself it was just for budgeting. My hands shook as I logged into the online portal. Rows and rows of numbers. Most of them familiar, his mother, his business partner, my own cell. But there was one number that appeared over and over. Late at night, early in the morning. Dozens of calls, dozens of texts, all clustered around the dates of his business trips. My heart hammered against my ribs. I typed the number into a search engine. Nothing. It was a burner phone, a ghost. The first real wall I hit. But it confirmed one thing. He was hiding something. The struggle wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about living with the lie in the meantime. I had to pretend. I had to smile when he called, his voice echoing from some hotel room thousands of miles away, or so I thought. I had to ask about his day and nod along to his fabricated stories of meetings and presentations. Every conversation was a performance. I felt like an actor in a terrible play, my own life recast as a tragedy. I was a stranger in my own home, a detective shadowing my own husband. The stress was a physical weight. I lost my appetite. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams filled with long, empty hotel corridors and doors that wouldn't open. I started looking closer at the credit card statements, my background in finance long dormant, kicking into gear. I wasn't just looking for hotel names anymore. I was looking for patterns. The florist near his office that we never used. The lingerie store downtown. The 2 tickets to a concert I'd mentioned wanting to see, purchased on a night he was supposedly working late. Each discovery was a fresh betrayal, a tiny pinprick to the heart. He was building a whole other life, using our money as the bricks and mortar. He was so arrogant, so sure of my benign neglect of our finances, that he barely even tried to hide it. Or maybe he just didn't care if I found out. That thought was the coldest of all. The rising challenges were relentless. He was a ghost, and I was hunting him through a paper trail. I felt myself getting harder, colder. The hurt was still there, a constant, low hum beneath the surface, but it was being overshadowed by a new, sharper emotion, rage. I needed more than just a phone number and some suspicious charges. I needed a name, a face. I needed to see what he was choosing over me, over the life we had built. Against every instinct in my body, I hired a private investigator. A man named Frank, who had tired eyes and smelled faintly of coffee and cigarettes. I met him in a sterile coffee shop halfway across town. I felt sordid, cheap. Handing over a photo of my husband, our wedding photo, felt like a desecration. He travels a lot for work, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I have a feeling, Frank nodded, his expression unreadable. He'd heard it 1,000 times before. He didn't offer sympathy, which I was grateful for. He offered a solution. We'll find him. For 2 weeks, I lived on edge, my phone a lifeline and a source of constant dread. Every ping made my heart leap into my throat. Frank was methodical. He sent terse, factual updates. Subject is at LAX. Subject's rental car is a black sedan. Subject is not at the conference hotel. And then the email came. The one I had been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. The subject line was simply, "Update." My hands were shaking so violently I could barely click it open. There were attachments. I opened the first one. It was a photograph. Mark. He was standing outside a charming, upscale hotel, the Cypress Grove. The same one from the receipt. He wasn't alone. A woman was with him, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. She was younger. Blonde. Laughing at something he'd said. She looked up at him with an expression of pure adoration. An expression I recognized. An expression that used to be mine. I clicked through the rest of the photos, each one a fresh stab of pain. Them, having dinner on a candlelit patio. Them, walking on a beach, his arm around her shoulders. Them, kissing, a passionate, unguarded kiss, right in front of the hotel entrance. Her name, Frank had written in the body of the email, was Chloe. She was a junior marketing associate at his company. He'd been her mentor. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I felt the air leave my lungs. The grief I expected was there, a vast, hollow ache in my chest. But something else was there too. A strange, chilling clarity. The denial was gone. The hope was gone. The love, which I had clung to like a life raft, had finally, definitively, sunk. All that was left was the wreckage. And in that moment, sitting in the dark, the blue light of the laptop screen illuminating the tears on my face, something inside me shifted. The grief calcified into something hard and unyielding. The victim inside me died, and a strategist was born. I wasn't just going to cry. I wasn't just going to confront him. That was his game, his script. He would apologize, he would gaslight, he would promise to change. I had seen that play before with friends. I refused to be a character in it. No. I was going to write a new ending. An ending he would never see coming. My old life was over. My new life began with a single, cold, calculated thought. I am not leaving with nothing. I am leaving with everything. My focus shifted from his heart to his wallet. If our marriage was a business, and I was the silent partner who'd invested everything, then he had committed gross mismanagement of assets. I wasn't just a scorned wife. I was a shareholder staging a hostile takeover. I stopped sleeping and started researching. I pulled every financial document we had. Bank statements, investment portfolios, tax returns from the last 10 years. I created a new set of spreadsheets, not for managing our household, but for dissecting it. I worked at night. After he'd made his perfunctory call from his latest business trip, my face a mask of loving concern while my mind was cataloging his every financial misstep. The house, I learned, was in his name only. A detail he'd explained away years ago with some nonsense about simplifying the mortgage application. It's our house, Liv. Don't worry about the paperwork, he'd said. My name was on the joint checking and savings, but the real money, the serious money, was tied up in investment accounts that were also solely his. I had access to view them, a courtesy he'd granted me so I could see how well we were doing. Now I saw it for what it was, a way to keep me informed but powerless. He was bleeding us dry. The money wasn't just for dinners and hotel rooms. It was bigger than that. There were lavish gifts, a down payment on a condo for her, hidden in a transfer to a holding company I'd never heard of. Payments to a private jeweler. A lease on a luxury car in her name. He wasn't just having an affair, he was funding a second, parallel life. A life where he was a benefactor, a sugar daddy, using the wealth I had helped him build, the nest egg I had so carefully managed, as his personal slush fund. The scale of the deception was breathtaking. It wasn't a mistake, it was a strategy. He was slowly, systematically siphoning our future into hers. The deepest crisis wasn't realizing he didn't love me. It was realizing he didn't respect me. He saw me as the house manager, the help, someone to keep things running smoothly back home while he lived his real life elsewhere. The pain of that realization was profound. It was a bottomless pit. I let myself fall for one whole night. I sat on the floor of my walk-in closet, surrounded by his empty suits, and I mourned. I mourned the man I thought I'd married. I mourned the 20 years I had dedicated to him. I mourned the woman I used to be, the one who believed in fairy tales and forever. When the sun came up, I dried my tears. The mourning was over. The war was just beginning. He had made a critical error. He had underestimated me. He had forgotten who I was before I became his wife. He had forgotten about my degree, about my ambition, about the sharp, analytical mind I had packed away like an old sweater. He was about to get a reminder. The idea came to me in the dead of night, illuminated by the glow of my laptop screen. I was staring at the photos of him and Chloe again, not out of morbid curiosity, but for tactical analysis. They were always at the same place, the Cypress Grove. It was their place, their sanctuary, a beautiful, historic hotel with sprawling grounds and a reputation for discreet luxury. It was his home away from home, the stage for his betrayal. And as I stared at the embossed logo on the receipt, a new search query popped into my head. I typed the Cypress Grove Hotel for sale into the search bar. My breath caught in my throat. The first result was a commercial real estate listing. The current owners, an elderly couple, were retiring. They were looking for a buyer who would respect the hotel's history and legacy. My heart started beating a frantic, wild rhythm. It was insane. It was impossible. It was perfect. This was it. This was the move he would never, ever see coming. I wouldn't just take his money. I would take his world. I would buy the very stage he used to humiliate me and turn it into the seat of my new empire. The decision settled over me with a terrifying, exhilarating calm. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about reclamation. I was reclaiming my career, my ambition, my life. The next few weeks were a blur of clandestine activity. I operated in the shadows of my own life. By day, I was Liv, the perfect, supportive wife, asking Mark about his deals, making his favorite meals when he was home. By night, I was a ghost, a financial predator. I contacted my old mentor from college, a woman who now ran a multi-billion-dollar real estate investment firm. I told her I had a personal project, a passion investment. I didn't tell her the whole story, just enough. She saw the fire in my eyes, the steel in my voice that hadn't been there for 20 years.
She saw the old me.
And she agreed to help. We created a shell corporation, a bland, anonymous name that would attract no attention. I liquidated every asset I had that was solely in my name. Old stocks I'd inherited from my grandmother, the savings account I'd had since before I met Mark, a few pieces of jewelry he'd given me that suddenly felt like blood money. It wasn't enough, not even close. But it was enough to prove to my mentor I was serious. She helped me secure the financing, using her reputation to back my anonymous corporation. The process was a tightrope walk over a canyon. Every phone call was taken in my car in a grocery store parking lot. Every email was sent from a new, encrypted account. Every document was signed digitally and scrubbed. Mark was oblivious. He was too consumed by his double life, too confident in my ignorance, to notice anything. He was on another trip to the Cypress Grove when my lawyer submitted the offer. He was probably in the King's Suite, the one from the receipt, toasting his success with Chloe, while I was on a conference call, my voice steady and professional, negotiating the purchase of the building he was in. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. The sellers were charmed by my corporation's proposal. I wrote it myself, a love letter to the hotel, promising to honor its history while gently guiding it into the future. I used my hospitality degree for the first time in 2 decades. I poured all my forgotten dreams into that business plan. And they accepted. The deal went into escrow. For 30 agonizing days, I lived a double life of unimaginable stress. I had to orchestrate the sale, coordinate with lawyers, bankers, and inspectors, all while maintaining the flawless facade of the happy homemaker for a husband who was becoming increasingly careless. He'd leave his phone unlocked. I'd see texts from her, full of heart emojis and weekend plans. It was fuel. Every loving message he sent her was another dollar of resolve for me. The day the sale closed, I felt no joy, just a profound, quiet, and terrifying sense of power. I was no longer a victim of his story. I was the author of his downfall. I owned his escape. I owned his sanctuary. I owned him. And he had absolutely no idea. The plan was simple, elegant, devastating. I knew his schedule better than he did. He'd booked another week-long business trip, flying out on a Monday. I knew he was going to the Cypress Grove. I knew Chloe would be meeting him there. He was so predictable, so wrapped up in his own arrogance. On Tuesday morning, I packed an overnight bag. Not the bag of a scorned wife coming for a confrontation, but the bag of a CEO. I put on my best suit, a sharp, black number I hadn't worn in years. It felt like armor. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back was not the same one who had collapsed over a hotel receipt a few months ago. Her eyes were clear, her expression calm. She was a general on the morning of a decisive battle. I flew into the small, regional airport near the hotel. I didn't rent a car. A driver was waiting for me, arranged by the hotel's general manager, a man named Arthur, whom I'd spent hours on the phone with over the past week. He was the only one who knew my identity. He was a loyal company man, and now I was the company. When I arrived at the hotel, it was even more beautiful than in the pictures. A historic brick building covered in ivy, with manicured gardens and a sweeping circular driveway. It was serene, peaceful, the perfect place to hide a dirty secret. Arthur met me at the door. He was a distinguished man in his late 60s, with kind eyes that held a flicker of apprehension. "Welcome, madam," he said, his voice low. I was no longer Mrs. Thompson. I was the anonymous owner of a corporation. To him, I was a mystery. "Arthur," I said, shaking his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. The property is magnificent. We take great pride in it," he said. "Shall I show you to your suite?" "No," I said, my voice cool and steady. "First, I'd like you to call an all-staff meeting. Everyone. Management, housekeeping, kitchen staff, valets. In the main ballroom." In 30 minutes, his eyebrows shot up. "All staff." "Madam, it's the middle of a shift." 30 minutes, Arthur," he nodded, the apprehension in his eyes replaced by dawning respect. "Of course." Right away, I waited in what was now my office, a stately room overlooking the gardens. I could feel the hum of the hotel around me, a living, breathing thing. My hotel. From the window, I could see the patio restaurant. And there they were, Mark and Chloe, sitting at a secluded table in the corner, laughing. He reached across the table and touched her hand. He looked happy,
Carefree.
a man without a single worry in the world. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't jealousy anymore. It was pity. He had no idea he was a fly, blissfully sipping nectar, just seconds before the spider descended. The clock on the wall ticked, each second a drumbeat marking the final moments of his old life. 30 minutes later, I walked into the ballroom. Arthur was at the podium. The room was filled with about 50 staff members in their various uniforms, all looking curious and slightly nervous. I saw the head chef, the concierge, the groundskeepers. A family.
My family now.
Arthur introduced me not by name, but as the representative of the new ownership group. I walked to the front of the room, my heels clicking purposefully on the polished hardwood floor. I looked out at the faces, and I felt a surge of my old passion, my old dream. I was home. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and strong, resonating in the quiet room. "I want to thank you all for being here. My name is Olivia Thompson, and as of last week, I am the new owner of the Cypress Grove." A quiet gasp went through the room. I let the name hang in the air for a moment. I wasn't hiding behind a corporation anymore. I was putting my name on my victory. I gave them a brief, heartfelt speech about my vision for the hotel, my respect for its history, my commitment to them, the staff. I saw the anxiety in their faces relax, replaced by cautious optimism. I was one of them, a hospitality person. They could sense it. Arthur will remain the general manager, I concluded. And I look forward to working with all of you to make this wonderful place even better. There was a polite, then genuinely warm, round of applause. As it died down, I turned to Arthur. There is one more piece of business, Arthur. A guest matter. I kept my voice loud enough for the staff to hear. I believe we have a Mr. Mark Thompson staying with us. In the King Garden Suite, Arthur's face was a perfect mask of professionalism. Yes, madam. He is currently on the patio. Excellent, I said. Please have 2 of your security staff meet me there. It appears he has overstayed his welcome. The staff exchanged confused glances. This was not in the new owner playbook. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, Arthur and 2 large, uniformed security guards following in my wake like a royal procession. We walked through the grand lobby, past the reception desk, and toward the glass doors leading to the patio. My heart was a cold, steady drum. This was it. The air on the patio was warm. The scent of jasmine hung in the air. I saw them before they saw me. They were holding hands across the table, leaning in, their heads close together. They looked like any other happy couple on vacation. I stopped a few feet from their table. Arthur stood beside me. The security guard stood behind us. I waited. It was Chloe who saw us first. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of confusion. She didn't know who I was, but she knew we were not waiters. She nudged Mark. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. And then his eyes met mine. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. The color drained from his face. The easy, confident smile vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed mask of disbelief. His brain seemed to short-circuit, unable to process the impossible image in front of him, his wife, the one who should be at home organizing his dry cleaning, standing here, in his secret sanctuary, flanked by hotel security. Liv, he stammered, his voice a choked whisper. He pulled his hand back from Chloe's as if it had been burned. What are you doing here? I gave him a small, cold smile. I didn't look at the girl. She was irrelevant. A symptom, not the disease. I could ask you the same thing, Mark, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I thought you were in Chicago. His eyes darted from me to Arthur, to the security guards. Panic started to flicker in their depths. The gears were turning, but they were grinding smoke. This didn't make any sense. There's a new owner, Arthur said, his voice a perfect, professional monotone. She wanted to greet the guests personally. Mark stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He still didn't get it. He couldn't. It was too far outside the realm of his reality. You're the new owner? He finally managed to say, the words laced with incredulous horror. The entire patio had gone silent. The clinking of silverware had stopped. The quiet conversations had ceased. We were the center of a very public, very quiet drama. I am, I said. And my first official act is to have you and your associate removed from my property. That's when it happened. The carefully constructed world of Mark Thompson, the world where he was the king, the master of the universe, finally shattered. The confusion and panic in his eyes erupted into pure, unadulterated rage. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair over with a loud clatter. You can't do this, he screamed, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling finger at me. This is insane. You're insane. Chloe looked like a terrified animal, desperate to flee. She was staring at me, finally understanding who I was.
The wife.
But a version of the wife she could never have imagined. Your reservation has been terminated, sir, Arthur said calmly. Our staff will pack your belongings and have them sent to you. I'm not going anywhere. Mark yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. He was losing control and he knew it. And everyone was watching. The security guard stepped forward. He looked from their impassive faces to my calm one. And in that moment, seeing no fear, no tears, no weakness in me at all, Only a chilling, final strength he broke. He let out a raw, guttural scream. It was not a scream of anger. It was a scream of utter and complete defeat. The primal sound of a man watching his entire world burn to the ground and realizing the woman he betrayed was the one holding the match. The aftermath was not a fiery explosion, but the slow, methodical process of demolition. His public meltdown was the end of the battle, but the war was won in the quiet, sterile offices of our lawyers. He tried to fight, of course. He blustered and threatened. He accused me of being vindictive, of losing my mind. His lawyer, a shark in a tailored suit, tried to argue that my purchase of the hotel was a marital asset, that he was entitled to half. My lawyer, a woman with eyes of steel and a spine to match, simply smiled. She presented them with the evidence of his financial infidelity. The condo,
The car.
the years of siphoned funds. She showed them the proof that I had secured the financing for the hotel using my own premarital assets as collateral and the backing of my mentor's firm, completely independent of our joint accounts. The accounts he had been so busy draining. She laid out, in excruciating detail, how his reckless spending had put our shared assets at risk. When she was done, the room was silent. Mark's lawyer looked at him, not with sympathy, but with annoyance. He had been lied to. Mark hadn't just cheated on his wife. He'd cheated his own legal counsel out of the full picture. The fight went out of him.
He was checkmated.
He knew it. In the end, he walked away with almost nothing. He lost the house, as it was used as leverage against the money he had stolen from our accounts to fund his affair. He lost his share of the investments. He lost his reputation when the story of his screaming fit on the patio of the Cypress Grove, and the subsequent reason for it, leaked out among our social and professional circles. Chloe, I heard, left him a week after the incident. She hadn't signed up for a broke, humiliated, middle-aged man. She had signed up for a benefactor. Without the benefits, she was gone. I, on the other hand, flourished. The hotel became my everything. I poured all the energy I had once dedicated to Mark's life into my own. I was there from dawn until long after the last dinner guest had left. I learned the names of every staff member, their kids, their stories. I redesigned the suites, revamped the menu, planted a new garden in the back. I was creating a space where people felt seen, a place built not on lies, but on a genuine passion for hospitality. It was my dream, deferred for 20 years, finally coming to life. It wasn't easy. There were days of overwhelming loneliness, moments when the ghost of his betrayal would walk the halls with me. The victory was satisfying, but the wound was still there. It had become a scar, a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I found I was a better leader than I had ever been a wife. I was decisive, creative, and tough but fair. My staff respected me. My business grew. The Cypress Grove became more than just a hotel. It became a symbol of my resilience. It was the place my old life ended and my new life began. Sometimes, late at night, I'll walk out onto the patio, the same one where his world collapsed. I'll sit at a quiet table, listen to the crickets, and look up at the stars. There's a peace here now that has nothing to do with him. It's a peace I built myself, on the ashes of a life I thought I wanted. I didn't just get revenge. I got myself back. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of your own. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life. Thanks for being here.